All right, good evening, everyone. It's good to have you with us here in City Hall, whether you're live here in person, watching on YouTube, on accgov.com, or on Charter Channel 180. We have a couple of successive meetings tonight. We have a brief special called session, and then our regularly scheduled agenda-setting session. And I will ask the clerk to call roll for our special called session.
Davenport.
Here.
Parker. Link.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Neesmith.
Present.
Edwards. Harrod.
Present.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
You have four.
All right. We have, again, just a single item of business, and now is the time for citizen input on that single item of new business that we're considering under suspension of rules, which is a small amendment to the qualifying fees that I'll discuss in just a couple minutes when we get to discussion behind the rail. Citizen input, if this opportunity is like it will be for the remainder of the evening, if you'd like to provide input, please come to the podium, provide your name, and let us know what item you're speaking about, and then fill out one of these cards so we can make sure we spell your name correctly in the record. Would anyone like to come to the podium to speak to this item? All right, we got crickets in the crowd for the item. As noted, we needed to slightly amend the previously approved qualifying fees for the 2020 general primary elections. The previously approved fees were based upon not only the base income for each of the positions, but also the cost of living multiplier that's applied to many of those positions. We actually have to set the fees based only on that base rate and not the COLA. So that's why the new fees that you see in front of you tonight. So any questions about this item or any input on this?
I move that we accept the amended fee structure.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Madam Clerk. Well, we need a motion for suspension of rules first.
So moved. Second.
All right, I've got a motion for suspension of rules from Commissioner Denson, second from Commissioner Harrod. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, rules are suspended. Now, Madam Commissioner, if you'd like to place that
Yeah,
again.
I'd like to make a motion for option 1, A and B.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright, second from Commissioner Harrod. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so business on our special called session being complete, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Davenport, second from Commissioner Harrod to adjourn special called session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are then moving on to our agenda setting session. Rules of public input are essentially the same. We'll have a call for input on the consent agenda, a call for input on old and new business, and then individually a call for input on the two planning and zoning items at the end of the meeting. Again, any public input is limited to 3 minutes. When you step up to the podium and begin speaking, you will see the light in front of the clerk turn green. When you have 30 seconds remaining, the light will turn yellow, and when your time is up, it will turn red. Surprise. So, any public input on our consent agenda to begin with tonight, and those are items number 1 through 8. Items 1 through 8. All right. Next, is there any public input on our old and new business? Those are items number 9 through 19. Items 9 through 19. All right, it's a quiet January in City Hall. Would any commissioner like to remove an item from the consent agenda and move it to new business for discussion?
Mayor?
Yes.
Item 1, if we could.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other item a commissioner would like to move to discussion? All right. We will proceed with new business. We'll begin with item number 1, which Commissioner Denson asked for removal and discussion. Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you. Really, just, we discussed this last year when it came out, and part of that discussion, we were able to get some numbers on arrests and incidents dealing with our SROs. And I would just really love to have that information presented again. I think it'd be helpful. It was helpful last time. So if we could have that, I'd appreciate it.
Manager Williams?
Yes, I think, great, and we can do that. And I'll further ask for some of the training that the folks have had. I think crisis intervention training is something that they've had as well. And I remember the emphasis on, that approach from last year.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Would you like that to leave that off the consent, Commissioner?
Yes, please.
Okay. Any other input on this item? All right, moving on to new business, item number 9, Dudley Park improvements. Of course, you remember we had a recent work session on this item, and there was a request, at least for a little bit of research on the part of staff. Manager Williams, I don't know if you'd like to
Yeah,
provide
I'll just
a little
speak
bit
to
of
that real quick.
Great.
Yeah, we met this morning, getting back and hearing the comments and understanding the intent. We're going to look at a couple of alternatives as far as sites and costs, and we'll share that with you hopefully later this week, early next week at the latest. And if a CDO needs to come out of one of those alternatives, then we can certainly help commissioners word that in a way that makes sense to the project.
And for members of the public, the question was about, is there an opportunity for a basketball court at Dudley Park, which is just east of downtown? Any other commission input on this item? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would like us to pursue hammering down a proper location for basketball courts and making sure that location is developed sooner rather than later. So I'm sure Commissioner Parker's going to have a few things to say about it, too.
Commissioner Wright?
As the other commissioner from Kentucky with Commissioner Parker, I'll help her out on making sure we get that basketball court in there.
All right. All right, moving on to item number 10, the change order for the Clayton Street infrastructure and transportation improvements. Any commission input on this item? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'd just like a kind of a more extended, especially for the public's purpose, why we are hiring an outside consultant for this project at the amount of $197,000. And, the tenure of that hiring, if we could just have stated for the public what this entails.
Absolutely. So this is not technically an outside consultant. It is the construction manager at risk, which was approved by the group. The company's name is Astra, and they've done some work with us. And so to help the public make some sense of this, it's a very complicated project downtown. There's all sorts of just the logistics in dealing with the downtown businesses. And I think the commission, I saw an article in a recent paper that said the off-delayed project. Well, that was through intent, that we wanted, that you gave us direction to be mindful of football season and certainly the holiday season for downtown merchants. And so rather than just do a low bid award for the construction, with the construction manager at risk, you actually bring that contracting firm in on during design, and they give feedback on constructability. And when you get to, in a typical design, bid, build arrangement, invariably if you get to issues during construction, the architect and the contractor are pointing at each other. In this case, the contractor is at the design table and helping to give instant feedback about, well, this would be easier if we could coordinate it that way. And because of all the, I think we found 60-plus utility conflicts that our staff's working through. And that, if you'll remember, was one reason why we thought we got an extraordinarily high bid the first time we went out with this, because there was so much unknown. And here, everything's transparent. Contractor can see what we're dealing with. You, of course, I think wisely approved our stormwater crews to go ahead and take care of those underground things. And so what we're doing, and really some of this is these funds that are being expended, we would have paid anyway. We're just kind of accelerating the involvement of the contractor on the early stages of construction. So this isn't just a new $200,000 that we're spending on this, but we need, this is going to require some very careful and close coordination. And in addition to that, we're also bringing the architect on board with construction administration services. They'll have a project ambassador who will be working with, constantly communicating with the businesses downtown. So this is sort of a full court press, to make sure that this is done well and disrupts our downtown businesses as least as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or input on this item? Can we move this one to consent? All right, Jean, number 10 is going to move to consent. A winning evening so far, my friends. All right, moving on to number 11, the request for funding to purchase necessary equipment for implementation of the new voting system. The agenda report outlines about $1 million of state expenditures that, in this case, if approved, would be matched with just over $100,000 of local money. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. Start this off, I had a question. It looks like we might have some numbers that are inconsistent, and I was trying to get some clarification on page 2 of the document here. It says that the state of Georgia provided ACC Gov with 298 ballot marking devices, BMDs. Yet down in the actual letter from the Secretary of State, it has it marked as 318 BMDs. And I was also at the Board of Elections meeting before this, and they cited the number 318 too. So I was trying to get clear on how many of these we actually got.
We can clarify that number. And I do know that we were having several discussions about having enough that we would actually put out in the field, and then we'd have some reserves. That might be some of the variance in the number.
Yeah, I just want to know how many the state gave us, I guess. I mean, that number should be consistent.
Sure.
Right,
I think at this point, everyone we take receipt of, which will get you the number,
Yeah.
has been paid for with the state. It's just this ancillary equipment that we're responsible for.
Right.
But I'll confirm that.
Okay, I get that, and I do definitely support us doing this. I mean, us basically going. What the state provided us is not enough for us to necessarily have a secure and accessible election. So this body is going to put another $102,000 forward so that we can make sure that we do have that. And I did, again, having the Board of Elections meeting before this, one of the big issues was us having the secure electrical capacity to have all of our precincts actually staffed with the numbers that we're supposed to have. That seems to be a massive issue that we're still not to the bottom of. But I was wondering, I guess just to put it out there as those conversations continue on the state level over the next few weeks, what the possibility is that we could find some other potential way for us to help ensure that we have that electrical capacity as a local body. Again, the same way that we're doing for the security stuff here. I hate that we have to pay for it here ourselves, but I mean, obviously having a safe, secure, and accessible election is a priority for us. So,
Thanks, Commissioner Denson. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I was also in the Board of Elections meeting just prior to this meeting, and I was also pretty disturbed by what I'm hearing. From what I understand, 18 out of 20 of our precincts do not have adequate electrical capacity to accommodate the required number of machines for the expected number of voters. And I don't see how this amount of money that we're proposing to allocate could fix this. I wonder if we shouldn't revisit this number. And yeah, these facilities are not necessarily Athens-Clarke County facilities. Most of them are Clarke County school facilities. But I think that we need to go above and beyond to make sure that our precincts are outfitted with the proper capacity. Apparently, these new machines, every single one of them is outfitted with a printer to print out a barcode that can then be read by a scanner. And because of that additional function of each and every one of those machines, they require quite a bit more electricity than our previous machines or, an optical scanner even by itself. I'm really questioning if this even goes far enough, and not to mention, the need for some additional marketing funds. I really feel strongly that our Board of Elections doesn't have adequate marketing to reach each and every voter when it comes to precinct changes or even voter registration deadlines and things like that. I'm wondering if we shouldn't increase this significantly.
Manager Williams, I don't know if you have any kind
do.
of knowledge of the electrical system needs.
Sure. And I don't believe staff would have known how many, because how many electrical services in our locations are deficient, because we haven't yet gotten the report back, but we expect it at any time. And this is new equipment, and this is, we just had a Department of Homeland Security kind of review all of that wasn't on the issue, and it's really equipment specific. We take receipt of the equipment, I think, the first week of February, and my walking about knowledge about this is that I don't think we anticipate any precinct changes for the March election, but for the May election we do, in that, and some of you have asked some very good questions about lines and trying to make the voting experience more convenient, and talking about breaking apart some of our precincts that were consolidated back out. And I think that is the elections director recommendation to be considered by the board at their next meeting for the May election, because we expect that to be a very busy election. All that being said, Commissioner Link, you could be very well right that we don't have enough funds in here. I don't think anything in here is really for electrical work. And we'll just have to look at that, and we'll have to hopefully use our own forces. We may have to come back to you with supplies. We could put a contingency in there for the voting meeting to try to cover that allowance so we don't have to come back to y'all. There's a number of ways we can do that, but we're sort of waiting to see how this all shakes out.
I have a question regarding the precincts. It became pretty clear after the 2018 election that we had some issues with our precincts, especially those combined precincts, not having enough machines to accommodate the voters. And that was a year and a half ago. Why was that not addressed in time for the presidential primary election? I mean, apparently they'll be able to squeeze it in before our local election, but for this presidential primary election, which is probably going to be extremely high turnout, especially in this county, we're probably going to see a repeat of 2018.
Well, I can't say what's going to happen, but I will say that my understanding from our elections director that she did talk with her board about going ahead and doing that prior to the presidential primary election. And with the new equipment coming in, they didn't want to introduce too much change at one time. And so they definitely want to, well, they will have to vote, but they are considering breaking down those consolidated precincts for the May election, which we expect to be very busy.
Commissioner Wright?
That my concerns line up a little bit with Commissioner Link, in that I suspect that they're going to need much more money than we're having in this. And I'm wondering if before our voting meeting that you guys would meet based on them just now having the Board of Elections meeting, that there could be something coming out of that. Obviously, that's happening. They're going to be meeting more often, and just making sure that we can get the money available as soon as possible. I'm assuming we have plenty of resources to help, and obviously we are going to. I think the last time that we had new voting system, I've learned that I think the state even supplied everybody with somewhat of a educator or trainer or someone to help with the transition, and we're not getting that from the state. I would also like us to be prepared to give more salary allocation so that we can make sure that we have the educational component that we need for our community with these new machines, and so that people are going in with confidence and don't and increase the ability for us to get an understanding of the new machines, the people, the poll workers, the people in Board of Elections, but as well as the citizens, so that when they do go vote, it can be not speedy, but a smooth process.
Efficient. Manager Williams?
Well, I thank you, Commissioner Wright. And it just for the public's benefit, so I don't know what the decision-making was to choose this particular type of machine, but to Commissioner Link's point, it's a ballot marking device. Of course, before, folks that voted had a card and it got slipped in and you made your picks, and then you handed the card over. In this case, the paper that comes out of the device,
Has to be.
I'm told it shows the votes that person made, and it has a QR code that will be scanned, but it is not a receipt for your voting, okay? So that needs to be turned in, and as the agenda item says, some of the extra people are there to help people understand, because they leave with the vote, then it doesn't count.
Commissioner Neesmith.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that we go through an orderly process of allocating the right amount of money at the right time. And I, for one, if we need to have a special call meeting at any point in time to do that, then, let's do it that way. Let's not try to make it fit our schedule. Let's fit its.
I agree with Commissioner Neesmith, although certainly Manager Williams, if we have some good sense a week from now of what a reasonable contingency would be, and we can approve that at our regularly scheduled February voting meeting, then that just allows us to have the funds available.
A week from now, we'll definitely give you a status update on that.
Okay. Thanks. Commissioner Denson.
Mayor, yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I wonder also, while we're doing that, if we could go ahead and maybe have a conversation with the school district. So I was going through 10 of the 20 precincts, in which I think all 10 of those, or at least 9 of them, do have these electrical deficiencies. So I'm wondering if we could maybe work with them to see if they'd be willing to help out to make sure that happens too. Just so we can have that conversation happen. But yeah, I definitely, and if possibly having a contingency in place for the voting meeting, otherwise, yeah, I support having a special call.
I was actually thinking about the fact that so many of these are school buildings and thinking that I've worked in a couple of these and remembering the number of microwaves, mini fridges, and floor heaters that were under desks. I was surprised to hear that the electrical system was an issue. Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I feel better if somebody from Athens-Clarke County Central Services went along. I mean, apparently the Secretary of State's office sent somebody to evaluate each location, and part of the problem was they couldn't get to the electrical boxes in many of these locations because the school district wasn't made aware that they would need to access that. I'd feel better if there was some coordination between that entity and the school district and an Athens-Clarke County representative who has, real expertise in electrical capacity. I'm sure we have folks on staff who can evaluate that and assure that we're getting an accurate assessment of these facilities.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Any other input on this item? All right. Moving on to item number 12. This is phase 2 of our stormwater mapping system, just an evaluation of exactly where those pieces of infrastructure are in the community. Any questions about this item? Commissioner Neesmith?
So this is phase 2, and as I read this, it'll result in 65% of MS4. What is MS4?
There's 4 M's that are involved in our the stormwater permit that we get from the.
So it's municipal separate stormwater system. That's what MS4 is. So it's
Yes,
MS.
I'm sorry, the acronym. There's 4 M's that.
MS quarter.
Yeah.
To the power of 4. Okay. So this goes into 65%. 65% of our infrastructure being mapped. Is there a plan to go further to get the remainder at some point in the future?
Yes, sir. It is.
Yeah, this sounds like a really good investment to make things easier to manage. So.
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that. What really makes it exciting is our transition to our CityWorks system, which is an asset management work order system for that multiple departments, leisure services, public utilities, public works. So we're getting on a similar platform. Before, in the not too distant future, we relied on long-term employees to tell us the status of certain segments of our infrastructure. So we're really coming into the modern age.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I think this will really come in handy for, average citizens who are involved in buying property or property development. I don't know how many times I've spoken with a citizen who wanted to build something on their property and all of a sudden found out they were going to be building over a stormwater pipe and we're not allowed to build over it. So this could be very helpful to the general public and hopefully save folks some headache and some money in the long run.
So this is our this will be for the public stormwater system, but there are private developers who in the past have put culverts in that we're still finding out about, I'm sorry, it's not 4 M's, Commissioner Neesmith, it's 4 S's.
Yeah.
And it's a separated
S to
storm
the fourth
system.
power.
Yeah.
Any other input on this item? Can we move this to consent?
I think so.
All right. 12 goes to consent. All right, item number 13 is the biosolids handling and disposal contract amendment. Any input on this item?
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Manager Williams,
Consent.
Yeah, let's just,
I did have a question about this. So I think the narrative in the agenda item makes clear that we've been using 2 of our 3 waste treatment facility materials for amendment for composting. We in the past have, evaluated the biosolids at the North Oconee plant, and kind of out of an abundance of caution with kind of one of the minerals there, not elected to use that for compost amendment. Do you know if staff has done any further evaluation on the biosolids out of the North Oconee plant?
No, sir, but I can find out.
Okay.
I mean, we
Appreciate
do periodic testing, I just haven't seen the results of
it.
late.
Okay. I'm going to leave this off consent just for a little bit, and I may move it back for the voting meeting. Item number 14 is acquisition of an environmentally sensitive piece of land at the Rock and Shoals natural area where we also own some property adjacent, including one of those waste treatment facilities. Any input on this item? Commissioner Neesmith.
it was discussed tonight at the Greenway Commission meeting, and they're very excited and supportive of it, and probably be giving us a letter of support. And as am I. I think it's a reasonable cost for something that if we don't capture it now, it won't be there.
Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, I'd just say, definitely in support of this. Commissioner Davenport and I were able to go and take a tour of this property, and it was one of those places where we kind of came through the trees there, and it didn't even seem like you're in Athens anymore. It just looks a completely different environment and ecology there. And really interesting, to learn that it's the same, rock outcrop system that Stone Mountain is. That just kind of continues right through the region. I think this is a great natural resource, and therefore it should be a public resource. So I'm very excited that we're doing this.
Great. Any other input on this item?
Consent.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think Commissioner Denson noted that, this is part of that sort of granite strip that lives under the earth. One interesting place where you can also see a component of it is if you're traveling between the Monroe area and Conyers on Highway 138. If you're going south toward Conyers, look off on the left and you see an element of it too. So pretty neat stuff. Is everybody?
Also, if you're digging downtown.
Good point. Yes. Commissioner Harrod accurately references the downtown granite, which you may have heard some dynamite around over some of the projects that have happened over the years. Is everybody okay with this moving to consent? Yes. Okay. All right. No, item number 15 is acquisition of computer software for finance and human resources. I know Commissioner Neesmith had a couple questions about this.
Actually, I have a lot of questions, and I'm not going to go through all of them right now. I've forwarded them to our legal staff and to Blaine over the last few days. And so I don't know how you want to answer these questions, Blaine, but really until I get some of these answers, I'm going to have a hard time supporting this. There's a lot of unknowns in this contract and a lot of confusion, and the numbers don't match either.
Okay. Well, thank you, and I do appreciate your thoughtful questions, Commissioner Neesmith. And I do have answers to most of them, and there's some that we're doing a little more digging on. But I can send this out to everyone tomorrow, both your questions and the answers. And, and it related to some details, to the agreement, whether it was a statement of work or what certain items were for, how the final testing would be done, travel expenses, how it's
Invoicing.
invoiced. Yep. So all those things, I can give you some pretty detailed responses tomorrow.
Oh, great. And I apologize for my obsessing on this, but this is something I used to do for a living. So
Yes, sir.
when I see the contract for computer services, I find it interesting, and
I think they're all relevant questions.
yeah. Thank you.
Any other input on this item? All right, moving on to number 16. This is design phase services for Taxiway A reconstruction and realignment, including an apron expansion project. In brief, for members of the public, this would sort of complete a missing connection on our taxiway that's parallel to our main airport runway and provide essentially greater parking opportunity as well. For those members of the public who don't know, when we have very significant community events, including football games, sometimes we have more than 200 planes parked out at the airport, and so this would help facilitate that. Commissioners?
Indeed. At the Notre Dame game this year, we had 150 aircraft at the airport, including a 737, which we can accommodate now with our new runway. And so this is the next big problem at the airport is where to park planes, and we get significant revenues from charters who come in, not just for game days, but just on a daily basis. But we do need a good taxiway, especially as we prepare to improve the second runway, and hopefully win this federal grant we're after and attract a commercial airline. So this is a very necessary project for us to move forward.
Any other input on this side? Yeah, Manager Williams?
Yeah, I just want to add to Commissioner Neesmith, what the general public may not know is that these projects at the airport are 90% funded by the federal government. And in this case, this design, the state sometimes shares, sometimes doesn't. In this case, it's 5% state and 5% TSPLOST. So I just want to let the public know that you're leveraging 95% of external dollars to improve infrastructure here in Athens-Clarke County with that TSPLOST vote.
Great. I appreciate that. Is this okay to go on consent?
Yes.
All right. We're 16 to consent. All right, moving on to item number 17. This is an authorization to issue general obligation bonds associated with SPLOST 2020. Throughout preparation of the SPLOST package, staff, of course, discussed with us the prospect that we would do some modest amount of borrowing up front so that we could kick off some projects right now rather than having to wait. So any questions about this item? Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I'm doing some math, so it's kind of scary, but I do have some questions I think I can get out here. So when the money starts coming in April, we can't get, it doesn't come to us until the next month. Is that correct? When we start collecting revenue?
That's my understanding. There's
Okay.
usually a month
Yeah.
lag time from the time they
But
start
yet we
collecting.
don't pay the $3.255 million in the service payment until December. And is that an annual amount that goes with $32 million?
Yes.
Yeah. So every time, so we can kind of estimate that every time we do a bond for that amount, when we start doing the next series, that's kind of a barometer we can use for how much we're going to be paying from our collections to the service payment.
Yes.
And it's annual in December, while we're collecting monthly, though.
That's right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're all aware of how that's going to be happening when we look at the amounts. The good news is, and I get this from SPLOST Citizens Oversight, that we've been averaging over 2.1 and more. We had the highest revenue coming in for SPLOST pennies in a month. So we are at a good point to where we're seeing that increasing amount. But I think it's smart that we're honing in. I think we're looking at 2.1 as our guesstimation for the math, so that then we can start allocating to other projects that aren't in the bond.
Yeah, and the projections of the sales tax were, escalated over the year, at an incremental amount. And just for the viewing public, to build on your question, rather than borrow 120-something million all at once, a majority of that would be for the actual construction, which wouldn't occur for another year and a half or 2 years, depending on these projects. They're pretty complex. We're only borrowing what we need
Right.
and only paying interest on what we need, but there'd be 3 issuances of debt over the next 4 years, and that will hopefully keep our interest down and preserve SPLOST capital for actual physical projects.
Right. And I was curious to learn what, and then I guess maybe that won't be, we won't know the percentage of the bonds, the rate that we're getting right up until that moment. But it's looking really good right now.
It is, and I think, and you should pride yourselves on that we have an exemplary credit rating based on the financial disposition of the government. That helps drive the rates. All things being equal, if the rate environment stays favorable in the next couple of 3 years, then we could expect more of the same. If not, then we'll have to see when we get there.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Commissioner Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This isn't about this specific issue, except a little bit tangentially, but I know in the past we've had some differences in terms of our understanding of collection of our sales tax and the numbers that we get from the Department of Revenue. And I seem to recall we had a conversation at one point about trying to get those basically on the same place. Do we have any update on that, do you know?
I know we've asked questions about everything ranging over the years from, let us manage it, to can we get some more data involved, and kind of where we are is what we get. And it's a month-to-month, summary of what that previous month has given us. And it fluctuates, and, we don't, there's so many different variables that affect that, economic forces, but we don't have any additional data than what we get now.
So when we do projections out, because obviously, the amount that we're going to borrow and for how long and interest rates and all the rest of it is based upon future projections of revenue. Do we use DOR numbers or do we use our numbers?
Well, we use the historic trend, and then we'll put a small, we look at how it's grown over time. What you can't really allow for is any huge movements in the economy, so we try to smooth that over and be conservative. I will say that the previous 10-year projections were pretty close to being on. So it's normally a real nominal 1% growth, but I'll go back and find the exact growth estimators that we have.
Because next time when we meet with our state legislators, I think that's another issue that we need to bring up is maybe we could get some better satisfaction from the Georgia Department of Revenue that, I think we'd probably do a better job of knowing who should and shouldn't be paying sales tax in our county than some bureaucrat over in Atlanta does. And so that might be some help we could get.
And that's an argument that I have heard from localities in Alabama. I think they did a pilot over there with their state government. So it was on the issue of fairness and equity, that making sure that, we had a more on the ground kind of knowledge of the businesses that were out there.
Well, I'd like to preemptively, maybe, Mr. Mayor, if you could put that on our list of things to discuss with our legislative delegation, because I think that's something that really has some very significant consequences for us here in Athens-Clarke County, and obviously for the other 158 counties as well.
I agree. I remember there was an analysis done in Hall County about a decade ago, and they found out that there were hundreds of thousands of dollars really being left on the table. So I'm similarly interested. I do want to highlight Commissioner Wright's point too, though, which is that revenue continues to grow, counter to some of the things that you might have read about happening statewide, where there's been reduction in other places. That has not been the case here in Clarke County. And in fact, year over year for the last 4 years, our sales tax income has grown, not shrunken. Commissioner Neesmith.
Yeah, and the problem is multifaceted. For example, we don't know where our sales tax comes from. We can't tell you how much comes from Atlanta Highway, how much comes from Lexington Road. So that makes it very difficult to see growth trends and market trends and so many other things. And then, of course, there's House Bill 276, which is in the legislature now, which is the one where where it would require for online services such as Amazon and Airbnb and Lyft to collect sales tax and pay those sales tax directly to the jurisdictions that it's owed. Unfortunately, I haven't read the entire bill, but there's something else it needs, and I hope that they put it in there, and that is unless we provide them with the data that they need about addresses, and they're required to use the address data, which might even be just the extended zip code, we still don't know if the tax is being collected and paid properly. Because right now, online businesses are using the zip code as to determine what the who gets the sales tax. And you've heard me say this before, 30622 is the zip code I'm in. It's a Bogart address. I don't live in Bogart. That post office serves parts of 3 counties. And I happen to know that there are collections of sales tax online that are going to Oconee County because that's where the city of Bogart is. And they've got to fix that too. They've got to make accurate reporting a requirement of online sales tax collections and payment.
And I believe that House bill passed the House already
Did.
and is now in front of the Senate. So I think now's the time to have those conversations with local members of the delegation.
Well, we will, and when ACCG gets back together at the end of all this and we see the results of it with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, we'll take both these issues up, one of them being that what I just mentioned, and the other being us being able to have some transparency about where our sales taxes are coming from by street and address and so forth.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak for the public because I think this is a little bit confusing maybe to most individuals. But what we're talking about doing here is basically funding early 3 of our projects in our SPLOST, which is going to be the facility space modernization project, which will be a future municipal building, the affordable housing project on the north downtown end of downtown Athens, and then the Classic Center Arena, just so that we could basically, as it says here, fund them for timely completion and get started early. So this won't be for the entire SPLOST list, but just that we can get started on those 3 large projects right away.
Thanks for highlighting that. All right, are we okay? Well, we don't have a final number, so let's leave this on discussion. All right, kind of in the same frame, really, number 18 is our intergovernmental agreement with the Classic Center Authority about just one of those projects that Commissioner Denson mentioned. Any input on this item? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, this is a 55-page agenda report with amended documents. I'm wondering if maybe management could print this out. I'm going to want to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and flip back and forth with a highlighter and a red pen because I'm going to have lots of questions about this. And particularly issues about the debt retirement. Once the debt is retired on that on the bond and the ground leasing for some of these properties. These are public properties. And when SPLOST passed, I was under the impression that once those bonds were paid off, the leasing for whatever facilities are built on these public properties would be returned to the government, but apparently that's not the case in this agreement. I'm just wondering if I could get a hard copy of this so I can, and I will certainly go through it more in depth. I have some questions about the senior housing and if we can work an affordable component into that senior housing facility. I think that would be completely appropriate. I know Commissioner Wright brought up the sign ordinance. I have a feeling there's a lot more in here that I'm going to want to have some questions answered and asked to be amended.
Make sure we get you a printed copy. Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about some specific sections and would be interested in other commissioners who might want to work with me on some of this. Let's see, on the arena signage, I think it's section 3.2, it acknowledges that, and I can understand that the arena would not potentially meet with our current sign ordinance or maybe a future one. And I'm okay with saying that they don't have to match it, but I do think that we should still have approval of what does go there. And so I'll talk with Judd maybe to see how we could word that, because I don't want it to have to adhere, but I also don't want it to be, I just don't want any surprises on what might it look like that doesn't adhere to our ordinance. So that would be a checkpoint that I would like to have in there.
Maybe not a Hindenburg style
Yeah,
visage
just, I
up in
mean,
the
some of
sky.
the corporate sponsorship, I get it. They might have to have some certain sizes for a certain amount of money, but still, we still want it to be classic and not out of character. The math on section 9.4 that is talking about the hotel motel allocations. Okay, so this is now in percentages when we usually talk about the penny. So manager, if you can just assure me that this percentage of, I get it that while there is indebtedness with the bonds, that they want to be able to count on the current proportion of hotel motel collections going to them. And that's what this percentage represents, right? The way we do the pennies.
My understanding, and Judd, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is a set index
Okay.
percentage during the life of the indebtedness.
Right. And then it's 85.71%, and then it talks about between 31.42% and 28.58%. Is that saying it's going to the CVB? Because it's talking about promotional convention visitors bureau?
I believe that's correct.
So that would be, that's replicating what
That's
we
right.
currently do now, making sure it stays that way while the bonds are being paid off. Is that right?
That's correct.
But it doesn't talk to what was mentioned in our last discussion about this a little bit. When the bond's paid off, that we're not, that section is a moot point, right? It's only when there's bonds still there.
And Judd, that's my understanding.
That is correct, Commissioner.
Okay. And so I didn't see anything in here that talked about what happens to revenue after the bonds and payday, if it would come back to general fund.
If you turn to
Yeah, tell me,
page 5, section C,
does it speak to that?
it would appropriate
paragraph
the,
4.
that would be this, Commissioner Link alluded to this. It would go into the life cycle budget for the Classic Center to maintain the facilities, which would be subject to the approval of
And
us.
a
as
slight
part of the
difference
budget.
is that that's referring to the revenue from the lease. What Commissioner Wright is referring to is the hotel motel tax take. So those are two different
Two different-
revenue sources for
Okay.
the Classic Center.
We could clarify, what it intends is that they're just saying, well, they'll continue to get what they're getting now until the bonds are paid off.
Yeah.
You know, then it'd be subject to amendment. We can add a sentence to say, after the bonds are paid off, it'll be subject to an agreement between the unified government and the Classic Center Authority.
Yeah, and I think that same statement should be in this other allocation as well.
Which one is that?
The one that's talking about the lease money.
So you're saying that is what Commissioner Link
Yeah, I think
was
it's,
referring to. So you're saying on both of those, you want to make sure it comes back?
yeah.
Okay.
And if you could write that up so it's appropriate in both of those, that could be in the form of a commission-defined option, because we talked about any changes that we want, we need to be doing this
Right.
before this is published again
I'll
for the voting
I'll
meeting.
prepare a commission-defined option with
Okay.
you as a sponsor on both those items.
Well, let me offer this too, Commissioner Wright. Any of that appropriation, the life cycle funds that Commissioner Edwards spoke to, would be part of the authority's budget that the future mayor and commission would have to approve. I mean, you could amend that. The agreement's just setting out what the intent is, but it preserves, if I don't read that wrong, Judd, that decision-making authority to the mayor and commission each annual budget appropriation
Yeah,
cycle.
it does restrict the use of the funds from the lease payment lease payments once the bonds are paid off to be used for the Classic Center facilities, but y'all have to approve how it's used there,
Yeah, and
which
I-
is different.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that we should not have that defined that way. I would like to have it termed to where it would be not restricted like that.
Yes.
And one more, I think.
And so just to make it clear, Commissioner Wright, you would like it not restricted to life cycle costs?
That's right.
And be able to have it be open to other operational costs?
That's right, like general fund-ish. Because I would hate for us to be in some sort of, not us, the future us, be in some sort of bind and need funding that is there, but yet it's restricted to only be life cycle repair. I mean, I get that they need that, but they could ask for money that we have, but some other need may be more pressing at the time. It's just tying a hand behind the back, or it's a restriction I'd rather not be in there. And, okay, and then on section 10.4, I think that the non-discrimination needs to be updated. They're not mentioning age or sexual orientation, and so if we can modernize that to where it's more relevant to, and I think that's what I would like to capture. And then we'll, if Judd and then Melissa, I'll get with you, and that might help you with what you're reading. Or anybody
We'll
else.
touch base with the attorney and work some things out.
Commissioner
Thank
Denson?
you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, my concerns are in the same vein, but I did have some questions a little bit. So on the hotel motel tax, where it has us saying we're going to keep the 85.71%, is that what we're currently, is currently in our budget? As far as we know? Yeah.
That's
I believe
right.
that's the current allocation.
Okay.
And we agreed to that when they were doing the math for this project and how things were getting trimmed down, right? We
So that's
agreed.
6/7 of the hotel motel tax.
Mm-hmm.
Just as-
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I guess we can look at that. And I definitely want the timing. Yeah, once the debt is out, I completely agree with Commissioners Wright and Link. I thought it's a bad idea for us to be making the decisions of a future commission, even if they do have to still approve that budget. We're creating a default situation, putting pressure on that future commission to have to not abide, but at least be guided by what's in this. And I don't think that's a helpful thing. So yeah, I completely support Commissioner Link and Wright. And I would happy to sign on to that commission defined option.
So see this. It's so weak.
Any other input? All right, some additional work forthcoming. All right, finally, before we get to our two planning and zoning items, item number 19 is a land swap agreement for facilitation of the component of Firefly Trail just outside the loop that's come back to us. Manager Williams?
Yes, and we've been back and forth. We're still dealing with the property owner on this, and we hope that we can come to resolution prior to the voting meeting. If not, then we would ask y'all to table it till the ensuing meeting.
All right.
Jeez, is this black?
All right, thank you much. Any other input on this item? All right, I am going to move down to Josh's seat for our two planning and zoning items while Planning Director Brad Griffin comes up.
I don't know how many times I missed the When you have a challenging table, you put extra.
It's true. When you see them walk in the door, you know.
Well, and when they come back, even when they come back, you don't act like that, but yeah, they definitely had it.
Tough crowd.
Yeah, and you even tell them.
All right, so we've got just two items, as I mentioned. The first one is a special use on Highland Park Drive, and I think Planning Commissioner Griffin is going to take us through that one first.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Two items tonight. First is a special use in the RM1 Mixed Density Residential Zoning District at 2024 and 6 Highland Park Drive. 3 attached single-family dwellings. There are restrictions currently in our zoning ordinance that limit each individual residence to no more than 10. They're proposing 9 in each one. The proposed use is compatible with mixed-density residential future land use, and as with any special use, if approved, the report, site plan, and existing architectural features become binding upon approval. See the property here subdivided into 3 single-family attached dwellings. Subject property there from the air and from the front. And then if approved, the special use, this is for a halfway house facility, very similar to the one that this body looked at about a year ago. And you actually see it there on the map just
Yeah.
to the top. Same operator, same operation. And I'll remind you, and there's some language in there, but the way this works under state law, you will hold a public hearing at your March meeting. You will not take a vote on it. There is a requirement that there has to be a waiting period of between 6 and 9 months after your public hearing before you actually vote on it. So the way we'll do it, we've advertised everything for March. We'll hold the public hearing. You won't vote, and then they will come back to this body probably in August, either August or September, and we'll go back through the mayor and commission cycle again for final action in the fall. Planning Commission recommendations on all 3 were to approve.
All right, and at our agenda setting meetings, when we have planning and zoning items, we do have an opportunity for public input of up to 3 minutes per individual, kind of under the same terms as described earlier. Is there any public input on this item? All right, moving on, the City Commissioner Harrod's District. Any input on this?
No, I think it's a reasonable request. As the planning director commented, we approved something very similar several months ago now. I can't remember exactly when. But Brad, could you go back to the map? Not this map, the other map, that one. So that bigger piece of property that's between the ones we approved 6 or 8 months ago, whenever it was, and the ones we're looking at right now, what is that?
I can get to it in the air. It is that building. It's a triplex, 3
Okay.
units on 1 lot.
I guess my question is, given the proximity of the one that's already been approved and what we're looking at here, in terms of the operation, since they're both owned by the same entity, do we know how, I mean, will they have people, staff members kind of going up and down the street from one to another, or are they separate staff people for each of the properties?
It's my understanding it is separate, the way they're operated, but we can certainly find that information out. The owner applicant, Ms. Church, called us today, was not able to be here, and she sent her regrets for not being able, but she said she would certainly be here for the voting meeting in March. Perhaps that's something we can have her clarify.
Okay, thanks.
Any other input on this item? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think this is, a good use for this particular property. I do have concerns about concentrating these kind of facilities all in one area. Like, I personally firmly believe that we should evenly distribute to integrate folks into our community. I don't know, I just have concerns about, this kind of becoming like halfway house row, but yeah, this is a part of town where we don't have a whole lot of these triplexes. This is like the one place in town where we do have these particular kinds of buildings that are conducive to this kind of use. I'm just kind of throwing that out there just because, I'm thinking of the future evolution of this part of town. I don't like the idea of concentrating poverty in one particular area. I like to see us trying to accommodate folks throughout our community.
I just want to be clear, this is not necessarily a case of concentrating poverty. This is
Well-
people that will be dealing with various different kinds of addictions that
Yeah,
are
I
not
get that.
necessarily poor people.
But but it's like a particular kind of residential use. I don't know. I'd just rather see this kind of stuff distributed more evenly throughout the community instead of feeling like we're kind of shuffling folks off to one corner.
All right,
I
Commissioner Thornton?
guess I came in on the tail end of this tonight. if there's really any shuffling of where people with special needs and treatment and all, it is North Athens. It is North Athens. I call my area the benevolent community. If we can go over there to help somebody else out, I'm good with it. They got to go somewhere. And normally it is North Athens. And that's fine with me. But I like to see help distributed. All of it should, our community, all should be the benevolent community. So I don't have no, it just caught my ear on the very tail end of that. I'm very sorry for jumping in late. But if Andy's okay with this, I'm definitely okay with it. Because if they're not, they're going to end up on North Athens.
It's all right, Commissioner Thornton. I think I've been in one of these units before. It was about 15 years ago, and it was with a group of people who needed some treatment. So it's a nice turnaround here, a decade and a half later. So.
And in a couple of months, you're going to get another request for something very similar in North Athens. I don't know when he's going to present it, but I do know that request is coming. So let's let all of the communities have some place where people can get help from. And yeah, I'm sorry I got chimed in late, but carry on.
Commissioner
Well,
Harris.
and just to add, I just want people to understand, there will be staff here on site. So in many ways, these properties are probably likely to be kept up to a higher standard because there are staff on site than if they were just rented to average renters who may or may not have a management person on site making sure that the properties are kept up. So, so I think that's an important thing to bear in mind, that in some ways it may actually help improve the area rather than see it deteriorate.
Hopefully a stabilizing influence here. All right. Next item is on Evans Street, very near the school board complex. I think Brad's going to take us through that one.
Yes, sir. 202 and 206 Evans Street is a straight rezoning request from RS8 single family to commercial neighborhood. Two parcels totaling about 1/4 acre. There is an existing metal building on the property. It's been there for many, many years, currently vacant. It is a residentially zoned 2 lots with a legal non-conforming use on it currently. Because of the zoning underneath, it's very limited in terms of what they can do. I mean, they could reestablish the auto repair business by right. They really can't change it to any other commercial type of use because of the underlying zoning. And so it's kind of stuck in this limbo, and sometimes that's okay. And that's why we have the legal non-conforming, to make those uses go away. This one, from our standpoint and the Planning Commission standpoint, was a little bit different given its location. And I'm getting a little bit ahead, but you see it right here. It is immediately adjacent to commercial general zoning and a convenience store along Broad Street. It is across from school district property. You see kind of how it sits in there. If this were a legal non-conforming use, I think in our opinion, it was deeper into a neighborhood and right on the transitional edge. It may not be as appropriate to make this type of a recommendation to you, but in this case, one of the benefits of establishing a commercial neighborhood zone still limits the uses. It doesn't allow wholesale across the board commercial uses, and it provides an opportunity for this property to go in, be cleaned up, more neighborhood compatible uses go into it, which it does not have now, and it affords us the opportunity to establish design standards on it in terms of getting a sidewalk in place, eliminating that continuous curb cut across the street frontage, getting appropriate buffers in place. So that we viewed it from that standpoint as perhaps a positive. So again, another picture. Existing future development map is traditional neighborhood, which the CN zone is compatible with. There would be the zoning change. And then just some of the comments. I've kind of touched on those already. We did recommend 2 conditions to the Planning Commission, and they have forwarded that recommendation to you with those conditions. that the driveway meet current code, and that buffers and screening where adjoining residential zoning districts be properly implemented. The reason we include, these are some of those things that upon significant redevelopment, they would have to be changed anyway, but just a straight change of use, if they weren't planning on expanding the building, doing any of that, our design standards don't kick in at that point. If they're added as conditions of your legislative action to rezone the property, then they are required to be done regardless. So, and those two were important, that we felt like that we get the buffers in place and that the driveway gets cleaned up. The rest of those standards will come with new construction. So the Planning Commission recommendation was to approve the rezoning with those two conditions, and it was a unanimous vote.
All right, again, there's an opportunity for 3 minutes from any individual for public input on this item. Just give us your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name's Dan Beynart. I live at 384 Nacoochee Avenue, where I've lived for 21 years. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. I'm one of the owners of the property that's up for rezone. We feel like we're kind of, like the manager said, it's stuck in limbo at this point because of the zoning, and without a rezone, there's really no motivation to rehab the building. We have interested parties that would like to do that, but it's contingent on the rezone, so that a business can go in there. Of course, the conditions are totally reasonable, and like he said, would more than likely have to go into effect anyways. So I would just encourage you to vote for the rezone. We feel like the planning department suggested that the step down to a CN was appropriate versus a commercial general, and it just kind of makes sense. I feel like maybe it was an oversight back when the county, when the city and the county came together. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Beynard.
Yeah.
All right. Then Commissioner Link's district.
Yeah, Mr. Beynart called me a few months ago about this property, and I suggested that he go for CN because I feel like he said, this is a property in limbo. It's formerly a garage, a pretty intense commercial use, but it's right adjacent to a single-family neighborhood, yet right across from this kind of industrial, institutional use school property. I think this offers us an opportunity to get this property improved and turn it into a viable business without it interfering with normal neighborhood activity. This neighborhood is really highly impacted by all that commercial general activity on West Broad Street and the high-speed traffic on West Broad Street. I really feel like it was kind of improperly zoned back in the day to have that kind of heavy corridor going right through a neighborhood. So I feel like this is a good transitional zoning for this property, and offers a little buffer between that commercial general heavy intensive uses that are fronting Broad and the existing single family neighborhood. So I hope everybody will support this.
Thanks, Commissioner. Any other input on this item? Commissioner Neesmith?
Brad could, oh yeah, there's the picture. So which is 202 and which is 206? Where's 202 here?
Let me get back to the plat. Well, you can see it there. I think it's just, it's two parcels, one development. I believe this is 202 and this would be 206.
Okay, so that parcel there in the photographs looks like it's part of the driveway to the filling
Like, get it
station.
up here. That property line sits about right here.
I see.
Or better yet, about right there.
I see. Okay, that helps.
It's just an old non-conforming use that is split across the property line from years ago.
Yeah. Well, I normally wouldn't support a rezoning that encroaches into a neighborhood, which this clearly does. But there was never a neighborhood where this building is. It's just next door. So I think this is probably something I can support.
Commissioner Harrod?
I just had a question, Brad. Didn't this, maybe I'm misremembering, did we talk about this maybe about 6 or 7 years ago? I remember we had a garage that was on a funky, it was non-conforming on a funky piece of property.
We did talk about a parcel just around the corner from here.
Maybe that's
that
what I'm
the,
thinking of.
Billboard sits on that actually fronts on
Yes.
West Broad Street.
Okay, okay.
It was part of the old, at one point, it was a racetrack in the middle, and there was a billboard on it, and
Okay.
I can show you where. Hang on.
Adjacent to where the Thai restaurant once was.
Okay. On Kalima.
Over here.
That's right.
that's where they wanted to
Okay, I got you. I got you.
And they bought the houses.
That's
and
right.
yada, yada, yada.
That's right. Most days I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but for some reason that was sticking in my head.
Such is the passion with which we perform our function here for the public. Any other
It
input?
was about 6 or 7 years ago. I
That's
think.
right. Yeah. They're,
Maybe even longer.
I've got a couple of fun recollections of that meeting that
Oh,
we'll
yes.
discuss later.
Oh, yes. Very interesting meeting.
All right, everybody, thank you for being here tonight. Hope you enjoyed your time with us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
This is the